The City of Johannesburg has yet another mayor. Thapelo Amad was elected the new executive mayor of the city yesterday after Dr Mpho Phalatse was ousted in a motion of no confidence. This was the second time that Phalatse has been removed from office. Jama-Ah's Thapelo Amad becomes the city's sixth mayor in 3 years. Well, how do these rapid changes impact administration and service delivery in the city? Well, Chair of Social Security Systems, Administrations and Management Studies at the Wits School of Governance, Professor Alex van Den Heever, joins us now to tell us more. Prof, thank you so much for your time and thank you for joining us this morning. Well, when it comes to Thapelo Amad, I think it's fair to say that there is a significant amount of inexperience when it comes to running a metro of this size. I mean, he's only been MMC for development, if I'm not mistaken, development and planning since 2021. What are your thoughts on his election?
I think it's very unfortunate because Johannesburg, with a budget of about 77 billion rand, really requires very experienced people to be in the executive mayor position and also as part of the executive. And I think that Johannesburg has had a history of poor governance for quite a while, and the city is deteriorating as a consequence. And one of the problems with that is that the city, when your administration is weak and it reduces the capability of the overall city to deal with extremely complex problems. And Johannesburg really can't afford to have that kind of administration. And I think to have somebody like this as mayor, I'm afraid it just has to be stated up front. It's an insult to Johannesburg. And it's going to have consequences. It's going to affect investment and it's going to affect the quality of service delivery. And the purposes for this kind of takeover really have to be questioned because it doesn't appear to have anything to do with being able to run a city of this nature or to introduce good policies. There's nothing like that. It looks like a straight power grab. Yeah,
when talking about the ability to introduce good policies, I mean, this is the sixth mayor in a span of 3 years. How much impact is this likely to have? Just in terms of political stability for a metro the size of Johannesburg? Because some may argue that, the technocrats haven't really changed. Individuals like the city manager, individuals who hold financial positions, for instance, in the city itself, those who are tasked really with ensuring, accounting officers, those that are tasked with ensuring that there is enough resources and funds to go around to ensure that the roads are paved and waste is picked up on time. That hasn't really been interfered with. It's more of what's happening in terms of the politics in the city. How much of an impact does that have in the running of a city?
So let's look at Eskom as an example. One could say, yes, the engineers were still there and the technocrats were still there and the leadership changed and it's not really going to have an impact. The problem is that those technocrats depend fundamentally on the quality of leadership coming through at the political level. And this is, although these are politicians at this level, they have an executive responsibility, day-to-day responsibility for making key strategic decisions. And they can influence the appointments into the system and have in the past influenced all the way through the public sector procurement, which is a major cause of the collapse of the quality of public services. But those strategic decisions, if they're missing, it means the technocrats are limited then in what they can achieve and do. So people aren't taking control of the reins of Johannesburg to just leave the technocrats to do the efficient stuff. So I think we're going to have a problem in what I would call the capability of Johannesburg's administration to continue competently going forward into the future. And when that capability deteriorates, the decisions deteriorate, the wrong things get financed, the wrong things get done, corruption becomes endemic. And it takes years to turn that around. And I think that we were looking at leadership that was able to slowly turn around Johannesburg. But when you have a city like this, you slowly deteriorate and then it becomes rapid. So I think important thing to know is that in a period of roughly 10 years, the population of Johannesburg will probably increase by about 20%. That'll be the only city experiencing that kind of influx. Do we have the leadership that can deal with the complexity that involves for a city like this? Housing, roads, the sort of management of spatial areas in an efficient way, dealing fairly with the public, and making sure infrastructure isn't overburdened and collapses. Those decisions have to be dynamic at this point. And we have a mayor who has no experience. You would never, no reasonable person would put such an inexperienced person in charge of an organization with a 77 billion rand a year turnover. This is, it is scandalous, essentially.
Well, I want to talk about motivations, Professor, for a moment here, because, you've used the term power struggle. The former mayor, Dr Mpho Phalatse, in her open letter that she penned, has described what's happened as a takeover of the metro. She's also likened it to a cash-in-transit heist. Of course, referencing criminal elements in using that particular descriptor. What are your thoughts? Because you've raised the issue around the fact that this is an organization with a upwards of 70 billion rand turnover. There's a lot of money at stake here. And we know that corruption, many of our local governments are not immune to the issue of corruption. So what are your thoughts on the concerns that she specifically has raised? That this has sort of opened up the floodgates to issues around corruption, to the stealing of state funds that are earmarked really to helping the city of Johannesburg's residents.
So I think that normally, you can attribute comments like that to sort of political hyperbole, and that's often the case. But I think the problem in this case is there is potentially a strong element of truth to this. If we had to look, part of this coalition is the ANC within Gauteng, and they are also implicated in dire corruption within the province that hasn't been addressed, such as the Tembisa case, where probably around about 1.2 billion rands worth of funds were siphoned out of the Gauteng Health Department with virtually no response from the provincial government, which suggests that the corruption goes right to the top. And now that same group is part of a coalition running Johannesburg with a massive budget. So it does raise serious questions. Parties like the PA, it's hard to know what kind of policies they're chasing. But when you look at this kind of coalition, you have to question their motives. We have to be on our guard. We have had so much of our public funds and public services destroyed by patronage and corruption. We can't be off guard here. So I think that I would have a big question mark over the motives here. It is potentially about power in order to exercise patronage over a massive budget, and not in order to address the issue of basic services and getting this city turned around, which is potentially a magnificent city. But it's going to go the route of many other cities in South Africa, unfortunately, with this kind of leadership. It is extremely dangerous. And it's going to cause disinvestment in Johannesburg. People are going to invest in Cape Town. They're not going to invest here. They're already moving investment from eThekwini and places like that. And we're turning a potential powerhouse into a fourth-rate city.
Right. Well, very quickly, Prof, because we have run out of time, the former mayor also acknowledging that she was removed from her seat legally. So, in essence, we're not likely to see any court challenges arising from what happened on Thursday. But also highlighting this issue around these power political shifts happening in the city of Johannesburg, not reflecting the will of the people. This wasn't necessarily a democratic change as we know it at the voting polls. What do you make of this particular predicament that Joburg residents find themselves in?
Well, the coalition has openly stated that they've placed this person in here with the purpose of doing nothing for 6 months, while they basically decide between the EFF and the ANC how they're going to chop up the rest of the metros in Gauteng. Now you think you've openly stated you don't have a coherent policy purpose here. All you want is somebody who will do nothing in a huge city like this, and who doesn't really have the capability, authority, gravitas to actually run a city like that. So why would you do that? So I would say that there are great concerns here. Yes, it was legal, But whether or not this is actually what the electorate in Johannesburg won is another matter. If we had a direct election for the executive mayor in South Africa, there is no possibility that somebody of this caliber would come anywhere close to being mayor.
All right. Well, Prof, thank you so much for your time and thank you for coming on to our program today. That's Chair of Social Security Systems, Administrations and Management Studies at the Wits School of Governance, Professor Alex van Den Heever.